All right, so we started World War I. I did 2 presentations so far with slideshow. So this is just a recap or redo of that so you can rewatch at your leisure because there's a lot of material associated with this. So we started out first with the world order. Leading up to World War I. Okay, so we created a generalized picture of what was the world like leading up to World War I. The U.S., this is U.S. history, but U.S. history does not happen in a vacuum. It's not isolated. It's related to things that happen in the world. Like the Industrial Revolution was not only occurring here, it started in England and was all over the place. So leading up to World War I, the U.S. was in what we just finished covering, or in the process of covering, the Progressive Era from roughly the 1870s to 1920. Okay. Then we need to look at the various entities in the world. Leading up to World War I, we had the Austria-Hungary Empire, or Austrian-Hungarian Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, whichever you want to say, under their leader, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And the Vienna is the capital. So Vienna, Austria. So when you hear that, you think Austria-Hungary Empire. They were a constitutional monarchy. It's located in the Central Eastern Europe. The other area of interest was the Balkans. And this is Serbia, Herzegovina, and Bosnia. Oops. So Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, those are the Balkans. And we had a character, Gavrilo Princip. He was a Serbian and a Serbian rebel seeking independence from the Austro-Hungary Empire. Okay? So, relating it back again to the Spanish-American War, where you had the Cubans seeking independence from Spain, the Filipinos in the Philippines seeking independence from Spain. Around the same time, you have Bosnia, Serbia, and Herzegovina seeking independence from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Okay? And he plays a key role in starting World War I. Another area of interest is the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, that is Turkey. So when you think of Turkey, not the food, the country, think of the Ottoman Empire. And this is a long-standing empire that goes way back all the way to the 1300s. And it was in control of much of Southeast Europe, Northern Africa, and Western Asia from the 1300s on. And then you had Russia under the Tsar Nicholas. And his German-born wife, Alexandra. Okay, so those are some places in the world that we need to keep in mind. The Austria-Hungary Empire under Archduke Franz Ferdinand, capital is Vienna, Austria. the Balkans, Serbia, Herzegovina, Bosnia, and Gavrilo Princip, the Ottoman Empire, which is Turkey, and Russia with Tsar Nicholas and his wife Alexandra. They have an interesting history if you ever come across that to read. Okay? So that's kind of sets up the world stage of some places other than England and France, which you're already aware of, that are involved, that are important. The next concept that you need to know is imperialism. At this time, the various European powers are all competing to create an empire, and imperial relations with other areas of the world, particularly Africa. There's a scramble for Africa for control. So, and last time I showed a map, and it'll be in the slideshow as well, of Africa and how it's divided up amongst the various European powers, okay? So, and what's important for World War I is that Germany was a little bit late to this game. They didn't get in there as fast as France, England, Japan, etc. So they're kind of late to the game and got some catching up to do in terms of forming an empire. So you have this going on in the world. You also have increased militarism. And that is the development of military arms and forces and technologies, warships, and all stuff associated with your military. The European powers were all growing in this regard, their armies, which leads to concern, right? I mean, if we're here in the U.S. and all of a sudden Canada starts building thousands of warships and starts doing plane sorties over our land, we're going to get a little concerned. So you can imagine Europe, where the various powers are doing this. Russia is building up its military. Germany is building up its military. All over Europe, okay, leads to concern. So that's another aspect of the world. The other aspect is nationalism. And there's two aspects to nationalism. Okay? We hear this word in the news a lot. And sometimes it's used with negative connotations. And I understand that sometimes, but sometimes I don't. So the first one is, first facet of nationalism is treating your country as coming first. We care about ourselves first. Our country first. Okay? You're going to act in your own self-interest. Okay? So that's the first aspect of it. The other one is, I'm going to say independence movements. This is where a group of people that have common descent get together and say we should be free. We are our own people with our own concerns, our own interests, and we do not want to be subject to imperial control of another country. We want to be independent. So that was the interest involved with Gavrilo Princip, right? And Serbia of the Balkans. Okay, so two aspects of nationalism. So we see this throughout the world. We saw this also in Cuba and Philippines, seeking independence from Spain. We saw how the U.S. got involved in that with the Spanish-American War. kind of associated with this, I talked about a strip of land, the Lorraine, Alsace-Lorraine portion of land in France on the eastern border of France that was taken by Germany in a prior war. So France, those people want to be back with France, another aspect of that. And France wants their land back. Now with these two and this competing situation in Europe with people or countries developing their militaries, you had countries forming various alliances. That's a very important term, ally. What does it mean to be an ally? Okay. And basically that's an agreement between two countries that if one is attacked, the other one will come to their defense, will work together. Or if you get involved in a war, we're on your side. Okay, we saw, leading up to World War I, a series of various agreements. The two examples were the Triple Alliance and the Entente Cordiale. The Triple Alliance was between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Triple Alliance Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, and the Entente Cordiale. And that was England and France, okay? Or Britain and France. I'm just going to say England and France. North Britain is Scotland, England, and Ireland all together. Okay, so through this, we've already connected some points with the Spanish-American War. Please keep those in mind and try to make those connections throughout our exploration of World War I. Okay? That's the idea of history, is connecting it all together. Seeing common features or factors. That's how we can predict things that may happen. Okay? So other aspects of the world, we have an increase in global trade. Increase in global trade. You have ships flying around. You'll hear merchant ships. That means a ship of trade with goods that they're selling around the world. There was a 1909 book, Europe's Optical Illusion, which argued that if two countries are connected in trade, and this is a theory that's used today often to encourage global trade and economics. It's the theory that if two countries are economically tied to one another, they're less likely to go to war, because it's not going to make sense to go to war. Because if I do, I'll lose all the goods that I get from that country and lose the income of things that I sell to that country. So why would I go to war with that? So interesting concept. Does it play out in World War I? Let's see. And how does global trade impact or come into play in World War I? Another one is increased democratization. Okay, we saw this during the progressive era with this idea that we want power to the people instead of these big corporations and the oligarchs. We want the people to decide. So we had developments like the 17th Amendment, the popular election of the senators, the recall, the initiative, the referendum, all these things trying to make the voice of the people be heard. So that was going on not only in the U.S. but throughout the world. And we had the fight for women's rights to vote. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, those popular characters from the progressive era. Let's see how World War I impacts that down the road. Okay? Because it will impact it. We saw the Industrial Revolution led to a lot of military advances. We saw it in the Spanish-American War with the USS Maine, which blew up. We thought it was a Spanish mine or torpedo or something, a Spanish mine, but it was really just a faulty design, and it blew up. So the question is, what other inventions or innovations through the Industrial Revolution impacted World War I? Another feature of the world, the growing existence of international organizations. Okay, so we're going to see that, and that's going to play out, especially with Wilson and his idea of what an international organization should have been. Okay, so we're still just creating this. What is the world like leading up to World War I? So all these are facets. So if you were asked to write a paper on that, these are the ideas that you would want to know. Okay, another aspect of it, or mnemonic device, is M-A-I-N, Maine. Okay, this just helps you to remember some of the facets of the world leading up to World War I. Arguably, these are what some experts say are the causes of World War I. These things together brought about World War I. Okay? Militarism. This growing of our armies. If we grow our armies and we train all these people and invest all this money, do we just want them to sit there and do nothing? That seems like a waste of energy, right? So once you build the army, the idea is you're going to be impelled to use it. Or why did you create it in the first place? Okay, so militarism, increased militarism. The A is alliances. One of the problems with an alliance is if you're a country and I'm a country and we enter into an alliance where I'm going to come to your defense if you enter into war, whether or not you enter into war is not really my prerogative, right? I don't have control over that. But all of a sudden, you get into a war, well, for whatever reason, whatever it may be, my country, is now dragged into that war. Whether I like it or not, pursuant to our agreement, our treaty of alliance, I'm dragged into it. So that arguably is also an argument for a cause of World War I. Because if we didn't have these alliances, some countries would have just said, hey, that's your business, it's not mine. I'm not entering that, and engaging in this. Other one is imperialism. We talked about that, this contest for Africa and other areas of the world to create an empire. Another arguable cause of World War I. And the last one, the N, is nationalism. In both of its forms. Okay? So you might, as you're thinking about this, think, what do you think? Which one of these do you think is the most salient, most important cause of World War I? And if you are concerned about a World War III as you read and watch the news, which one might you be concerned of? I don't know. That's up to your thought and your reading, your research, okay? In the slideshow, I have this little bubble chart that you should should ultimately fill out that'll help you remember all that. So that basically concludes the picture of the world leading up to World War I. The main acronym is used by some scholars to argue what were the causes of World War I. Militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism to varying degrees, and you hopefully will have and develop your own thoughts as to what is the most important. So that's the first segment.